everybody. It's Karen with Covenant Eyes.
And Brandon Clark here. We're the hosts of the Covenant Eyes podcast, coming to you from Provo, Utah. What are we doing here, Karen?
I don't know. What are we doing here?
We are here for the premiere of the Sound of Freedom movie. Now, if you listen to our podcast, you heard us talk to Tim Ballard. We had a great conversation hearing about his story, and now we are just gearing up for the kickoff of the movie officially.
It's going to be an exciting night. We have got a lot of great guests. They're going to be coming down this red carpet, and we can't wait to get started. So without further ado, here we go.
Well, we're here with Jordan Harmon of the Harmon Brothers with Angel Studios. Very excited to visit with him now about this movie. Jordan, big event. It's the premiere here of Sound of Freedom. What's going through your mind and heart at this moment?
Gratitude. Grateful to be here and to get this story out to the world.
When you first came upon this story, what went through your mind? Why was it something that you knew you wanted to get behind?
So it's when people watch this film, you know, it speaks for itself. I mean, it is a masterpiece. But beyond that, you know, I have 5 children. My brothers have children. And we look at this and we understood at a deep scale the problem that was happening throughout the world in terms of this issue. And so it became apparent to us that, you know, we created Angel Studios with this mission to tell stories that amplify light. And this was our opportunity to tell a story that amplified light into the darkest places of the world, in the darkest corners of the world. And we are just hopeful that the movement will be the beginning of the end of these atrocities.
That is an amazing way to think about this, because the movie is so moving. It is so beautifully done, and there is no one that can walk out of that theater unchanged. So what is it that you hope that people do after they watch this film?
That's a beautiful question. I think everybody's experience is going to be different, and everybody has different capabilities and different resources and different skills and gifts. And so my hope is that people can look inwardly. Alejandro Monteverde says he wants the movement to begin when his movies end. That's how he wants his movies to be. And so he's done a masterful job of doing that. And so when this movie ends, I want people to look introspectively at what's their sphere of influence, what are the resources they have. It might be as simple as just telling your friends and family. You know, it might be paying it forward so others can watch the film for free.
Yeah.
It might be that, you know, you don't have resources, and so you need to claim a free ticket from someone else to come watch it and participate in the movement. And then other people might have significant resources that they can help the organizations that are extremely adept at trying to solve these problems. And so that's our goal, is that Angel can bring the awareness to this problem, and that all ships will rise with that rising tide, and that these organizations will be given the resources and the abilities to solve this problem for the world.
Eduardo isn't able to be here tonight, but at NRB, at the Angel Studios social, he talked about how when he came upon this film, he set everything aside and is putting his heart and everything that he has into it to succeed. Are you guys doing the same thing at Angel Studios?
That's our hope. You know, we hope that we've left everything on the table. You know, we went for a crazy date of July 4th between 2 tentpoles of Indiana Jones and Mission Impossible, but we felt strongly that we could dedicate our entire company and our resources to making this a success. And we felt that the best day to do that was Independence Day, to hopefully, you know, like at Concord, that there's a shot heard around the earth that God's children are not for sale.
It's a great movie, and we encourage all of our listeners to get out there, get to a theater, bring your friends, bring your church, bring your family. Thank you so much for your work. It is such a blessing, and we hope that it inspires the nation to rise up and do something about this problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Here with another interview, we've got Jaime Hernandez, who is one of the film's producer for Sound of Freedom. Jaime, thanks so much for visiting with us for a few minutes. Talk about your role with the film.
Absolutely. You know, I was fortunate to be one of the producers of this great project. Particularly, I oversaw the physical production of the film. So it's definitely been a bit of a journey. Our whole team started working on this project a little over 8 years ago, and so excited to finally be here and for the film to come out so the world can see it.
8 years.
8 years.
8 years. That's what stuck out to me too.
What took so long? What was standing in the way of the film being done?
I mean, it was a big process, just trying to discover the best way to approach this subject matter. I mean, it's a tough subject matter to tackle. When you mention child trafficking, that's not something that immediately people say, "Oh, I want to watch that," So it took a little bit of just figuring out the best artistic approach for the film, and then the pandemic happened, and it was a couple of years with theaters shut down and the industry trying to recoup. So it's different things that affected it, but again, we're so excited to be here. It's definitely a project that I feel very proud to be a part of, one of the most important films of my career. I think that people are going to be very pleasantly surprised. I think they're up for a bit of a roller coaster. This movie will make you laugh, will make you cry,
yes.
Will touch your heart, and more importantly, and that's our hope, that it can inspire people to action and to use their talents at their platforms to try to get involved and make a difference when it comes to putting an end to child trafficking.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and we hope that this movie does that, because we have had a preview of it, and it is incredible. You have done
really
fine
is.
work. Oh my gosh, it's incredible.
The talent pool that you had to work with in the movie must have made this both challenging to be able to utilize the gifts that they have, and also such an amazing opportunity. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the cast that we have is remarkable, and not only the cast, but even the crew as well. I mean, I believe that everyone that ended up being part of the movie one way or another is because they really felt the calling to get involved. I think that, the actors, we have Mira Sorvino is an Academy Award winner, and when we, reach out, she said, yes, I want to do it. Same
Wow.
thing with Jim Caviezel. I mean, there's people that, are very sensible to this particular subject matter and immediately decided to get involved. And when I mentioned before, also the crew is, I don't know if people, might be aware, but we've had very talented individuals working on this project. Javier Navarrete, who's our music composer, he's been nominated for an Academy Award.
Wow.
David Jamarco, sound mixer, he's been nominated for an Academy Award. Mira Sorvino, who I mentioned before, Academy Award winner. So, it's definitely a movie that is important when it comes to the subject matter, but I also believe that it's a very ambitious, artistic, approach, and I think people will not regret going to watch it.
At Covenant Ties, we fight against pornography, and there are strong ties between pornography and human trafficking. So what message would you want to leave with our listeners about getting in the battle one way or another?
I think that we all were gifted different talents, different skill sets. We all have different platforms, and I think that with any social issue, social cause, the only way that we can put a stop to it is that we all come together and we each use our talents, our platforms, our gifts to try to contribute to, put an end to that specific social issue. And I think that applies to child trafficking. I think that applies to, pornography. So I think it's something that it requires unity and teamwork. And I think sometimes our society, either for different reasons, focuses more on what divides us. And I think that if we really took a closer look, there's more things that unite us as human beings than those that divide us. So I would just ask or invite people to really, try to chip in whatever capacity they can.
So tell us a little bit about what it was like working on this film.
It was intense, and it took a long time to get the script right, because the difficulty is balancing a subject matter that can be very heavy, very difficult, with the sort of obligation we have to the audience to tell a great story.
Yeah.
And to make sure it's a movie that people want to watch.
Yeah.
But we didn't want to cheat the mission part and the reality part. So finding that balance took a long time, and a lot of drafts. But we did it, and Alejandro did an amazing job directing it with visual beauty, which I think helps people absorb a difficult subject matter and really get it.
Yeah. We had a chance to visit with Tim Ballard on our podcast earlier, and just his story is so incredible.
Yeah.
Being able to bring that to life on screen must have its challenges. There's a lot of movies out there in Hollywood that are based on a true story, right?
Yeah.
How important was it to get this right so that you could capture as much of the story as you could, not over-dramatize, but still leave an impact?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's always the challenge. Honestly, if you're dealing with a living subject matter for a movie, or even one that's not living, but where there's a historical record, you're always balancing what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And because, like I said in the first answer, the obligation to the audience is to tell a great story.
Yeah.
And Tim's story is amazing, but like every human story, you need to refashion certain things or put them in different. Just because our lives don't unfold in a 3-act structure, it doesn't work like that.
Yep.
So that's always the challenge. Tim was there every step of the way, making sure that we were telling the truth with a capital T about what he does and who he is. And so it was a great collaboration in that way.
Well, for our listeners out there, what would be a really good takeaway from this film in your perspective?
I think the takeaway is to be aware that this is happening in the world, as uncomfortable as it is to know that, and to find a way, if it moves you, to do something about that. And one of the things that Tim says over and over again, which is fascinating, and I've come to really believe it, is that consciousness and awareness is actually the change. I mean, once your consciousness is raised, once you know that it's true, you will likely do something.
Yeah.
But without that, we don't do anything. So the first step is actually knowing, and that's why a movie like this, getting out, having people really just talk about it, see it, talk about it, tell other people about it. It sounds a little bit self-serving because I want the movie to do well, of course.
Yeah.
But it's actually,
Right.
the mission is raising awareness. So that's the first step. That's what I hope happens.
And you're a storyteller. And one of the things that Jim has said and Tim has said and Eduardo have said is it's the storytellers who are going to make a difference. So what is your message for those storytellers who are listening right now?
Tell the story. Tell the story. Get out and let people know that this is happening. That the movie's happening on one level. That's one thing. But that this issue is ongoing. That the trafficking of children is happening, and that by raising awareness, by raising consciousness, that will change. It already is, little by little, and hopefully this is the tip of a tidal wave of a lot of change.
I believe it is.
It
Thank
is.
you so much for your time. We appreciate it. God bless. Take
right.
care.
Well, thank you. Yes, I'm CEO of Goya Foods, but also executive producer of The Sound of Freedom. I met Eduardo Berastegui. I can pronounce that name pretty well. And back when he was 33 years old, he did the movie Bella.
Yes.
He did Little Boy. But this is his crowning jewel. And this was a jewel of a movie, but it was sitting a little bit in the dark. And Angel Studios, what they have done is bring this out to the light, because it's so important that the awareness of child trafficking. There's 40 million people trafficked a year. It's a $250 billion business.
My goodness.
25% are children, 75% are women, and the U.S. is the biggest consumer. So, this movie, hopefully, when I got involved in it, we developed Goya Cares around that, which also has to do with trafficking and mental health. But when I got involved in it, I had no idea of what, of the reality of this. I mean, and so young and abused and being sold for profit. And, it's just one of the biggest businesses in the world besides arms sales and drugs. And the drugs in that go also hand in hand. But this is a movie that, I tell you what, the acting is fantastic. And Jim Caviezel comes up with lines that that weren't in the script.
Yes.
Like, better a millstone be tied around your neck. And then and the other actor was there like, what's just happened? But they said, roll it. But we go back, and this movie, like I said, has kind of been sitting there, but it's action-packed. It touches you. You cannot go out of this movie with dry-eyed or unaware of what this scourge is. And again, in our spiritual battle of good versus evil, the Holy Spirit is involved in this. The Holy Spirit, I think, is going to bring this movie and awareness to another level, and it's going to help to. We got to get the message out, to love your neighbor as yourself. Stop being so self-focused and focus on the other person. If we do that, we're going to have a better world.
Bob,
absolutely.
This is a movie that has deeply touched you, and you actually formed a coalition as a result of that. Talk a little bit about that for our listeners.
Yes, well, Goya Cares involves that. It's a worldwide organization. We partner with other organizations like ICMEC, International Center for Missing and Exploited Children, a network that goes around the world. We support different organizations. But, again, it's such a large... We needed to, when we saw this movie, and I've seen it a few times, people like Ben Carson have gotten involved and wow. Many people, but not until Angel Studios has stepped in has this thing really started to take off. And July 4th, the sound of freedom and the freedom that we have earned as a country, that we've received as a country. When I see a service person, I say, thank you for our freedom. We have generation after generation that has lived in freedom but not appreciated it. Yeah. We don't realize the cost of freedom. And so, and we live in this bubble in this country where we've been free for many years. Yeah. We haven't been in conflict. Our country hasn't been taken over. And we need to maintain that. And freedom is so important. And it's about freeing these children, bring them out of the darkness into the light, and free them.
Amen.
Praise God.
Nothing more important.
Yes, absolutely. And you can't leave this movie without being changed as a person. Right. I know that this movie is going to change the hearts and minds of this country. So thank you so much for your work on this.
If God willing, yes.
Yes. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us? Maybe an interesting fact, something interesting that happened during the filming of this movie that maybe you want to share with our audience?
Well, unfortunately, Eduardo Barasaki, he can't make it tonight, but there's so many flight cancellations and things like that. But he told us of a few things. Of course, they wanted to shield the children from the reality of the movie, and they did a very good job of that. But at one point, when one of the little girls realized what the subject was, she just broke down. And, there's other parts of it that, it's better someone like Eduardo to get into it. But and then, like I said, Jim Caviezel took such a passionate part in it. Yeah. In The Passion, he was hit by lightning twice, broken ribs, broken
he got
shoulder.
Scourged.
Yes, he got scourged. I mean, he took on the life, the passion of Christ. And he takes that passion to Sound of Freedom. And this is a really great movie.
Bob, you certainly have a passion, and we thank you for your time. Karen, it just can't be said enough how important it is to get out and support this movie for all of our listeners. If you don't have a ticket, buy a ticket, pay it forward for somebody who can't afford a ticket, because this needs to get out far and wide.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. God bless. Take care.
Thanks, Bob. It's so good to talk with you. It's so good to be at this event. What's this moment like for you?
This is a big moment for Angel Studios. It's the first time we're taking a motion picture that's not faith-based, and it is a thriller action hero movie, and taking it on a full global release.
This movie really has a story. It's been done for 5 years. They've been trying to get it out, fighting against Hollywood. My understanding is it took a year for Angel Studios to get the rights back to the movie, to be able to get it out. What's this moment like to be here at the premiere, know it's going to be premiering on the 4th of July?
It feels like divine providence. The way that this whole project has come together feels like all the timing has just lined up. And when we picked the 4th of July, we were told by advisors that the 4th of July is the most difficult time of the year to go to theaters. But it felt right, and it felt like the right time to tell a triumphant story. And on top of that, we learned afterwards that one of the characters in the movie who's trapped in slavery in real life was rescued on the 4th of July.
Oh my gosh.
We learned that after we picked it. But so one of the main characters in the movie was a little girl. Her rescue happened on the 4th of July.
That's incredible. Wow, that is divine providence. Oh my gosh.
What's really amazing to me is just to see how people across the nation have gotten behind this. Something that's really special about Angel Studios is the crowdfunding aspect. What does it mean to you to see millions and millions of dollars raised to support this effort?
It is so important for a movement to be supported by the grassroots.
Yeah.
And so the 7,000 people that came in and put $5 million into getting this film into a nationwide release, we call them angels. They're the angel investors.
Yeah.
Our company's named after them. That's how important they are to us.
That's really special. Well, thank you so much for visiting with us. Thank you for being here and putting this event on. Karen, we just are so excited to continue to visit with people, but ultimately see this movie tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us, and thank you so much for being here. Hey, Covenant Eyes family, we're back on the red carpet, and we have a treat for you. We have the one and only Tim Ballard joining us. Hey, Tim. So tell us what it feels like to have this movie going live.
Well, you know, we've had several premieres. This one's the most significant. I mean, it's really a providential thing that Angel Studios happens to be in the same state where me and my family live.
Wow.
I mean, they literally are 30 minutes from my house. This theater's 20 minutes from my house. And so my family's here, and they don't, I don't get to see them very often. And a lot of my kids are going to watch this film for the first time. And so it's exciting for me to, hopefully, because, one of the great regrets for me is I always wanted to be like my dad. My dad was my coach. My dad didn't miss anything. Didn't miss a game, and I miss everything, I mean, I have one kid one of the kids a kid that I rescued, from trafficking and we adopted. I didn't get to one of his games because the nature of this work, and I often wonder, do they get it? I hope tonight they get to watch the film, and I hope they will somehow understand that their sacrifice also will be blessed, because their sacrifice also led to what, to the liberation of children. So.
There's a heartache when you watch this movie as a parent, having young children and seeing just the diabolical things that take place. It may be tough for parents to watch, but what message would you have for them about supporting this film and doing what they can to raise up their families in the faith, but then also be involved in some way?
Well, I don't think there's ever been a time in the history, at least of this country, that children have been placed in the crosshairs of spiritual warfare. And it's not just kids that are, being trafficked in Cartagena or Honduras or wherever in the world. It's actually much bigger than that. It includes things like, kids who don't even make it out of the womb. That's part of the field of what I'd call child slavery.
Yeah.
It includes kids being sexualized by godless bureaucrats who want to shove pornography in their faces in the name of sex education, or allowing a 13-year-old to consent to anything and everything, including hurting their own person, because that's just going to lead to allowing them to consent to have sex with a 50-year-old pedophile.
Yeah.
And the kid's already been sexualized, so they're conditioned for it.
Yeah.
So we live in this world where children are in the crosshairs of darkness.
Yeah.
And so I hope this film doesn't just open people's eyes to the rawest form, the most obvious form of modern day slavery, which is, trafficking and what you're going to see, but the other forms of it that can be every bit as deadly.
Yeah, this film is it's a life changer. I think anyone that watches this film is going to be inspired to do something, even if it's to share the message, but maybe it's get involved. And Tim, how can people get involved with your organization?
Well, I'm the founder of Operation Underground Railroad. People can go to OURrescue.org. I'm also the CEO of the Nazarene Fund, which does the similar work, helping persecuted Christians and other religious minorities. And we're launching a whole new thing. There's a coalition of many, many organizations. It's the tip of the spear, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's called the Spear Fund. And
Wow.
people can go to thespearfund.org. Tonight's the first time I'm talking about it. We're officially launching this in a few days. But thespearfund.org helps us to identify whatever organization out there can do the best job in this particular area, in this particular moment. They get the grant, and the kids deserve that kind of response. So.
As we wrap up our time, I see the message on your shirt. It's a message in the movie, God's children are not for sale. What do you want to leave our listeners with about that particular message?
This is the punchline. This is the tagline of the film. At one point, a character who's a friend of mine in real life, Vampiro, leans across the table and asks Jim Caviezel, playing me, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Because, and it's a loaded question asked by a person who knows how loaded it is, because he knows why he's doing it.
Right.
It hurts. It hurts. You're away from your family. You're risking your life. You suffer by seeing stuff that that burns a million holes in your brain. Yeah. There's only one reason anyone's going to do this, and Jim says it. Well, because I got to meet my maker someday, and I've already seen it. I can't unsee it, and at the end of the day, I have to go back to my maker and make sure that he knows that I adhered to this statement, godly statement, that God's children are not for sale.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for all you're doing. Thank you so much for being here at the premiere. I really hope your family just is moved by this and can see basically everything come together. Well, we're so excited to be visiting with Alejandro Monteverde now, who is the director for the film Sound of Freedom. Also a big fan. I first came upon your work with Bella and then Little Boy, and we're just so excited to see you involved with another film. Talk about what it means to you after being involved with several films to have this one on your docket.
Well, for me, this movie was a calling. I always say there is two kinds of films in my life: the ones that I want to make and the ones that I'm called to make. So this was a calling, and I also understand, that there is this darkness. And I was part of always complaining about the darkness, always cursing the darkness. And when I dove into this team, I realized that you can curse the darkness or you can light a little candle. And for my only way we all in our own ways and whatever we do is lighting candles. Like right now, just this interview, creating awareness is lighting that candle. For me, it was to write a movie about this subject matter. And I started writing, when I learned about this, I saw a news report on child trafficking, and it shook my soul because I didn't know about it. And I also shook my soul that there were people that knew about it, good people, that were doing nothing about it. That's also another way of, if you know about something that is happening and you're doing nothing about it, that may put us part of the problem.
Yeah.
So I decided the next day to kind of figure out a way that I could light my little candle, and I started writing a fictional story on this. And it was not until some time that the producer of the film, we were working together on this, called me and he said, "Do you know who Tim Ballard is?" And I said, "No." He said, "Google him and call me back." So next thing you know, I Googled him and I realized that his true story surpassed fiction. And that's how we end up here. Long story short, I met Tim, and next thing you know, we started writing the script. But the most difficult part of this journey was, at the end, you go to the movies to enjoy film, to be wrapped in the language of cinema.
Yeah.
How to write a movie and make a movie that audiences can digest and can be inspired. And that was the greatest challenge.
That is
I feel very, very proud that we did it for about 2 years. We did a lot of screenings because of COVID, and I was allowed to see the reaction of the audiences, and I was blown away because even though it's a dark subject matter, people will live in many ways in a reflective state of mind, which is it's one of my greatest accomplishments as a storyteller. I like to make movies that begin when the movie ends.
Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of people that have seen the film, they say when they leave the theater, it's quiet. It's dead silent.
Which is scary in the beginning.
Yeah, I bet.
The first time I did screen the movie was like, oh, nobody likes this film. And I think they were processing it. And they were in that state of reflection.
I think anybody who sees this movie needs to discern what their calling is.
Yeah.
You said you were called to write and direct this movie. there's people out there who are called to do something with it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I just feel like the easiest thing to do is to talk about it. You talk about it, you create awareness. That's it. Just talk about it. That's the beginning. Awareness creates change. You cannot change something that you're not aware of.
Yeah.
So that's the first step. Now, if you're called to do something more, that's a very personal journey.
Yeah. So as we think about the premiere tonight, we think about the launch on July 4th. What goes through your heart as you talk about the years that have been put into bringing this all together, the different screenings, and now it's finally going across the nation to theaters?
Well, this is it's like David. We're the underdogs here. It's David against Goliath, but our David is way smaller.
Yeah.
Because we're coming against the big blockbusters. 4th of July celebrates freedom, but it's also a day with all the blockbusters with hundreds of millions of dollars on marketing are coming out.
Yeah.
So it's very important that the audience, I wait to come to see this film. I wait to celebrate the 4th of July, which is freedom. You can also honor freedom by coming to see a film about children that lack freedom, that are on the process to be rescued. So I ask the audience that it's really important to come and support this film on the first week, because if we don't come up with the right numbers on the first week, we're out of the game. Right now we're in the game, and we need to stay in the game, and the only way to stay in the game is if we get the support from the audiences. It's very important that people come and support us on opening weekend.
Yeah.
Well, that seems like a pretty clear call to action for all of our listeners out there. So
Yes.
if you're listening to this podcast, if you're watching it on YouTube, you know what you need to do. So let's do that. Let's get out there. Let's support this film. Let's make it big. Let's make sure the world hears our voice when it comes
Amen
to
to
this
that.
film. Thank you
Thank
so
you very
much.
much.
Thank you. God
Thank
bless
you,
you and
Alejandro.
your work.
God bless your
Take
work.
care.
Neil, thanks so much for taking a couple minutes to visit with us.
You're welcome.
So we've spoken to a couple of your brothers who have talked about just the heart that went into being able to work with this movie and bring it forward through Angel Studios. I want to hear your side of it and what this means to you to have crowdfunded over $5 million and be able to bring it to so many theaters across the nation.
Sound of Freedom is a once-in-a-century type of film that's coming at the exact right time. And it is a riveting, true story that's inspiring. And I hope that as people watch this film, that they'll pause afterwards. They'll listen to their heart and take a note on a paper or on their phone of what they feel they can do within their own circle of influence. And I think if we all do that, our grandchildren will look back on this time as the begin of the end of child trafficking.
Praise God. That would be an amazing outcome from this movie. And I hope that people, our listeners specifically, take that to heart. This is a powerful movie. I know when I saw this, I was moved and I was on fire and I was mad, and there's so many emotions you go through. So tell us a little bit about, what it took to bring this to fruition, because it was kind of a journey, right, to get this movie made?
This movie was started 8 years ago and completed almost 5 years ago. So the more difficult part for this movie was actually coming to market, and we couldn't be more grateful to the angel investors who support Angel Studios that have made it possible to release this movie on July 4th.
You've had screenings all over the nation. What's the reaction been as you have watched people see the film, leave the theaters? A lot of quietness, I'm guessing.
I love the stories that I've heard. Just 2 days ago, someone reached out to us and they had purchased the domain name soundoffreedom.movie. They said, we didn't want this to be used for nefarious purposes. It's yours. A teenage girl from Miami, she watched the film. She spent the entire next day researching Tim Ballard's work and learning how she could dedicate her life to child trafficking. There were music producers who watched the film on a Sunday night and didn't sleep until Thursday, and they produced a brand new song, and it's a big surprise now in the credits. So these are the kinds of things that are happening where people are feeling moved to ring the sound of freedom all through the world.
Yeah. Well, it really is. I remember seeing it. I got to screen it at NRB, and I just remember sitting there at the end, not knowing what to think, not knowing what to do, but knowing that there is a mission, and we're all called to that mission. So for our listeners who are called to take action against things like pornography, what would you call them to take action against when it comes to this movie?
I've seen the faces of teenage boys who have watched this movie and come away very somber. I think they understand that their choices can have a large impact on who they become, and this movie wakes people up to that reality. Nobody wants child trafficking. Nobody wants pedophilia, and there's not one bust, according to Tim Ballard, there's not one bust he's ever done where there wasn't an addiction to pornography in the background.
Wow.
We believe it. I mean, that's the work that we do here at Covenant Eyes, so we understand that. Well, thank you so much for taking time to talk a little bit about this movie with our audience. And again, audience, get out there and see this film. You can make this big. You can send a message across this country. So please get out there and support the movie.
And I do want to point out that this opening weekend is crucial for the success of this film in theaters.
Right.
We have to make it big so that it continues to grow in the number of theaters, but then also remains in theaters longer. Like, this is a big moment. So please support it, pay it forward, do whatever you need to do, but let's make this big.
I want to just take a few minutes in closing to kind of recap some of our conversations, and then also let you know why this is important to Covenant Eyes and the work that we do here at Covenant Eyes. Brandon, do you want to speak a little bit about some of those interviews and maybe tie some of that to our work here at Covenant Eyes?
Yeah, there's just so many things we talked about. So we talked with the director, Alejandro Monteverde, who talked about this film being a calling. And I think, when we think about our work at Covenant Eyes, it really is a calling.
It is.
We battle against pornography. This movie is fighting against trafficking. But it's all one mission, right?
Yes.
We're all fighting the evil of sexual exploitation.
Absolutely.
And that's one that really stuck out to me. Bob, one of the executive producers, who formed a coalition out of this to continue to gather more momentum. Even the gentleman who we spoke with, who is making a Harley, a custom-made Harley, to fight trafficking, to support Tim Ballard's organization. Yes. I mean, it really just goes to show that all of us have a role to play, as we've talked about on Covenant Eyes podcast.
Absolutely.
And it's our job to discern where we're called in that role.
So true. And the thing that's really interesting, too, is that oftentimes at Covenant Eyes, we talk on our podcast a lot about creating education and awareness.
Yeah.
And that is the mission of this film. It is to educate and equip people with knowledge and information about this topic, and that it's happening all over the globe, and that we need to take action. So I love that it aligns perfectly with our mission at Covenant Eyes as well. So this has just been a really rewarding experience, and I think we've met some pretty incredible people, and I hope our audience enjoyed all the interviews.
Yeah, and we got to interview a couple of the Harmon brothers as well with Angel Studios, and the work that they've been doing, I've been following them for several years, but this really is kind of one of the pinnacle points. It really is a movement, and we saw with Jordan Harmon how emotional he got as we talked about this, how this is personal. Really it is, to all of our listeners, this is personal.
Yes.
It's a personal mission that we have against pornography, against exploitation, as I was mentioning, and we really want to encourage you, if you didn't catch the drift from all of the interviews, find a way to get involved, find a way to take action, Karen.
Absolutely. So thank you, all of you, for tuning in, and we just want to encourage you, get out there, see this film, take your family, take your church, make this a church-wide activity.
Absolutely.
And let's do something about this problem.
And then you can also pay it forward. That's the other thing I want to make sure. So if you don't want to go see the film because you're worried it's a little too sensitive in content, I get it. However, pay it forward. Buy a ticket on the Angel Studio website and allow somebody else to go see it.
That's great.
It's a role. We all have that role to play.
Absolutely. Well, from the red carpet here in Utah, we are signing off. Thanks so much for tuning in. God bless. Take care.